Hello, friends, and welcome to 2% the podcast, where we break down the tactical strategies used by today's leading D2C brands to learn how they grow their business by 2% every day. This episode is brought to you by Caro, the #1 collaborative commerce platform for D2C's best brands. Today, I am joined by Hans Kunisch, the SVP of Growth Marketing at Heights. Heights makes supplements and probiotics for whole body health and mental well-being, making brain health simple and convenient. In today's episode, we talk all about growth marketing in the CPG and direct-to-consumer industry. And I ask Hans a lot of questions around how he's taken Heights from $2.6 million in annual revenue all the way to $10 million in annual revenue. We talk about tactics that are working on the customer acquisition side. We talk about SMS in the UK and consumer behavior in that UK market. We talk about growth tactics for improving revenue dramatically. And we even talk about the role of AI in direct-to-consumer. All of these questions and topics and more will be covered in today's episode. And with that, I present to you Hans Kunisch of Heights. Hans Kunisch, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good to be here. Hot in LA.
Yeah, we were just talking about that before. We're only like about maybe 100 miles apart, but this is the time of year in Southern California where we get to complain for just like a little bit, while the rest of the country is like, you guys just need to shut up. So it's we have about 2 months here, maybe of hot weather, and then it goes back to normal.
At least we're not freezing in San Francisco.
Yeah, that's true. But SF is a good time. I got to get up there soon. But hey, man, I'm so excited for this conversation. I'm fascinated by your story. Our mutual connection, Cade, who introduced us, actually was sharing to me a little bit about your background. Led me down a rabbit hole of looking at your LinkedIn and stuff and just seeing what you've been up to. And it's an awesome story, man. I'm excited to be able to kind of talk about this today. You've gone from an aspiring chef in Japan to jumping to the business side of food, holding various roles, working in some of the most highly notable D2C CPG brands, on the growth marketing side, household brands at that too, like Impossible Foods, Wild Earth, now Heights. And I'm excited to dive into all that today, man. But I'd love for you just to share a little bit of first, like, how did you get here? How did you go from aspiring chef to jumping into the business side of food tech? I'd love to understand that.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I started in food, in kitchens, working in kitchens, just because I love the pace and I love the energy of it all. But eventually, like, you get worn out by it. And, I graduated school with this degree in sociology and business, and I was like, what am I going to do with it? I don't know. I just want to keep cooking, and like, that's the life for me. So that brought me, from New York to Japan, and then from Japan to California in San Francisco. And eventually my body just started to say, hey, you can't do this anymore. Working in kitchens is brutal. So that's when I got into the distribution side of the business of food. And started working through different companies, worked in big distribution, really started to understand retail business, really started to understand food service business, and really I actually started to understand business. Working in kitchens, it's really just a grind all day long, get it in, get it out, that's it. But with working in distributions, that's where I started to learn about the nuances of businesses, talking about products, learning about consumer behavior, the stuff that they don't really teach you in school. So from there, I started my own company with a business partner. We were doing distribution, marketing, branding, and operations for European companies here in the US. We're very successful at that over a 3-year period. We had 25 sales reps across the country. I was flying all over the place. I was doing like 120,000 miles a year on United. I hated it at the end.
Some good miles there, though.
I did calculate it out. I think it's like 100,000 miles means you sit on an airplane for 8 straight days. And like, I couldn't handle it anymore. And at that time, being in San Francisco, that's when food tech started to come out and come to being. And that's when a lot of investment was happening. And I got really, really interested in that, in the new wave. And I was working on old world food. It wasn't solving any problems other than like, things that taste good. And that's when I started to get involved with Impossible Foods, Biddy Foods, which was a cricket food company, Kite Hill Foods, which is an almond milk replacement dairy company, and a bunch of other different projects. And what I found really there was the startup world. And like, that's where I was like, oh, wow, this is just like being in a kitchen. And I talk a lot to people about how like being in a kitchen And working in a kitchen or working in a restaurant, like your goals are so immediate. And with startups and especially D2C, the goals are so immediate, the pressure is very high. And so, they're really the same environment, same job. And so I think that's why I really started to fall in love with startups and the Silicon Valley mindset of, I hate to say it, and I can't believe I'm about to say this on a podcast, but move fast and break things, right?
Totally.
Zuckerberg. But like that's how it works, and I loved it. So I got involved with Impossible from 0 to 200 million. And from there, I was doing the old world stuff, which is food service and retail, and I hadn't really fully gotten into D2C yet. I had done a little playing around on Amazon sales for Biddy Foods, but I really hadn't done direct to consumer. So I got asked by an investor to go talk to someone at Wild Earth, Ryan Bethencourt,
Mhm.
and they were just getting ready to launch. And I was like, oh, dog food. What is, I've never done anything but human food. So I started at Wild Earth and we were zero revenue, pre-revenue I was there. We were all D2C and we accelerated from 0 to 10 million in about 16 months. And I'm sure that's a growth story we're about to get into. And then after that, I needed a little break because that's what startups do. I got tapped by Heights to say, hey, can you come in and help us out? And for me, it was another extension of what is the CPG category. And for me, not just doing human food anymore, but extending out different categories was important at the time.
Mhm.
So start at Heights, and they were about 2.6 million, and we'll probably close just towards 10 million by the end of the summer.
Wow. Dude, that's
Yeah.
awesome. It's a lot to unpack there. It's fascinating to see how you managed to stay close to food, on both sides of things kind of now. And I'm curious, like, there's that old phrase, like, work with what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Like, was it always for you, like, you knew you had this passion for food and you just wanted to find a way to be involved throughout, and that's what kind of led you on this path. Like I think about, like, a lot of times, you find folks who aren't passionate maybe about like the work that they do or the business that they're
Yeah.
producing. It's just a job to them, but you've like really kept in this lane, and I really admire that. I'm just curious, like, was that always a goal for you?
I mean, look, you develop these things as you move through life, right? I think for me, it was always about like, serving people, doing good things for people, and like that's what cooking is. You're providing something to someone, and like you're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see the smile on their face. And CPG, all the way through, that's what you're doing for people. And you hope, the goal is like your hope that your brand and your product is something that people love, is something
Mhm.
that people want and need in their life. So I think for me, the arc of CPG is that story, which is like doing and developing and bringing things to market that people love.
Totally. Yeah, I've had some other CPG folks on previous pod. I've had Jake Carls from Midday Squares. I've talked to Will Nitza from IQ Bar, and they share a similar kind of story of that as well. It's always great to hear that from the entrepreneurial side of things. Let's fast forward to Heights. I want to kind of start there, and you mentioned all these awesome brands that you've worked with. Why did you pick Heights? And maybe share a little bit about like what the company was like before and kind of after, as you've stepped in here. You mentioned that revenue growth already, but
Yeah.
what led you kind of to picking Heights?
Yeah, it's actually kind of a tough story. So one of the reasons I mentioned I took a break from Wild Earth was because my father died, and he died of a brain tumor, and so that was really really hard for a family. It happened very fast, and when you're so deep into startups, you don't really have time for a lot of other stuff. And during the
Mhm.
process of Wild Earth raising Series A, this was going on, and at the end of the summer when we had closed the A, I was just spent. And so I took time off, and I got approached by Heights. And for me, I'll take one quick step back here. For me, how I started to develop, what I'm doing in the vertical that I define myself on is better for people, better for planet. And so that's how I look at the products I want to work with, if they're serving both of those things. And so when I
Mhm.
was approached by Heights, I come off this really tragic thing. And they being Dan and Joel, the two founders, were coming to me with this concept of brain care. And for me, it just like it hit me immediately. I was like, supplements? What? Brain care? That's interesting.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't say that, this was like a rebound effect. It was just something that intrigued me where I would have probably normally shut it down. But then, when bad things happen, we look for like the good. And so that allowed me to open up my horizon and say, what are Joel and Dan doing? They're trying to build this category of brain care. And now it wasn't related to anything that happened to my father, but like this is an important thing. When you're about 28, I think, that's when your brain starts to degenerate.
Mhm.
And so taking care of your brain is such an important thing. It's the third largest organ in your body. And the internal saying that we have is if you take care of your brain, you take care of your body. So for me at the time, while the category of supplements was new, the idea and the concept of what Dan and Joel are building at Heights was not. So it allowed me to say, yeah, like this is super interesting. This is a good business problem, but it's also something that fits my vertical, better for people, better for planet.
Love that. Yeah. Super, super mission driven on that. And also I think just like having that guiding principle. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
like when I've thought about like where I want to be, like what I'm working with, always if there's that kind of common thread that stitches me to like the why, it really creates that sort of like you just kind of feel a little bit more attached to your work. I've done a lot of consulting on the brand side of, working with, brands that do, kind of health food, brain food focused like stuff as well. Like, and similar, I've had history of Alzheimer's in my family and stuff like that. Like if there's always that kind of stitch that you can tie back, I find that you really get a little bit more fired up, I think, than your kind of conventional job.
I mean, it's interesting, right? Like I think there's almost two kinds of people in this world, and I'm not talking cat or dog people. Like, there's two kinds of people in this world: the people who have passion for their work and are driven by that, and then the people who are just like, I'm just going through this, like what you're
Totally.
just kind of mentioning. For me, like, and the people I work with and the people I found myself surrounded in D2C community, startup community, those are the passionate people. And I just look at folks, who I've like my brother, for example, he's just getting his job done and he doesn't understand me. And I look at him and I'm like, bro, I don't understand you. But like, we both are getting what we want out of our lives because they're just finding their passion elsewhere.
Totally. No, I couldn't agree more, man. And I think it's a great transition now, I think, into digging a little deeper into kind of, you're excited to be at Heights. It's this awesome opportunity. Coming in as like the SVP of growth, like what are you responsible for? Like how did you get going? Like just talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I entered the company January 22, and so came in as a very senior leader for a company, very young company. The company started like right at pandemic.
Hmm.
Interesting time for them. So I oversee basically all of the growth, the marketing, the branding, the creative, all of that. So we have a stellar team. And when I got into the company, it was, at about 2.6, kind of flat. They're struggling a little bit. I mean, this growth, this massive growth in D2C, especially, you get these veins in these tranches. And they were struggling to find the way to the next vein or next tranche of growth, if you will. And so what I started to do was really kind of unpack what folks were doing, look at what the growth process was, and really start to hone in on a certain key areas that I believe really drive the growth. And once we started to put a process into play to focus on those areas, that's when things started moving for us.
What would you define, going from 2.6 to 10, was it that you mentioned? 10
Probably
million?
10 by the end of the summer, yeah.
That's impressive. What
Yeah.
would you say like those veins or those tranches kind of have been for you at a high level? We don't have to go too deep, but I'm just
Creative.
curious, like what were some of those kind of veins for you?
It's fast cycle iteration of creative, for paid social. And
Hmm.
for us, like that's the core channel,
Okay.
where we acquire customers. And so for us, getting that process into play where it's just like quick, 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 and trying new things all the time. And I've got this saying, it's like scale or kill. If you can't scale it, kill it.
Yeah.
And no one can be precious to it. But that process and that cycle of deploying out that creative and scaling or killing is really what helped us get to where we are.
Yeah, no, it's a similar theme I hear a lot. You talk about paid acquisition and some of that, like that scale or kill mentality. Revenue channel wise, paid social being a big one for you. Was there anything else that kind of proved pretty lucrative for you guys or has proved pretty lucrative? Or you bring in most acquisition through that paid funnel and then retention on the back end of that?
Yeah, retention is quite good, and I think that's that's something to do with the brand, and we can get into that, but that's very big for us. And so our acquisition is all, and basically it's really Meta,
Mhm.
and some stuff on Google, but that's paying the Google brand tax. But
Sure.
it's really Meta. That's where we are.
Got it.
The other channels we can get into it, but like it's for a company of this size and this stage, trying to do too much is something like always talking about. Like we can't do everything. Like we just want to do fewer things, do them really,
Mhm.
really well.
Totally. I mean, it's a classic, business kind of fallacy you see is trying to do too much too fast. You're spread too thin. Like I know it's most cliche thing I could say back to that, but I think it's like I remember back on the brand side, like when we tried to get really creative and just diversify as fast as possible. Like there was so many leaky buckets that before we knew it, like our best acquisition channels were suffering because we just weren't putting enough time into like just like the Meta, the Google. Like we were trying to do all these things that were popping up around 2019, 2020 kind of timeline. So
I mean, we can
that's
talk
fa-
about TikTok, like, and I'm sure, I think everyone's kind of, I don't know if you want to do that now, but like everyone I think is starting to realize, oh, TikTok isn't an acquisition channel. If you're in a certain type of company, right? Like for us, we need a lot of trust,
Mhm.
because people are putting it into their bodies.
Right.
It's not like, an iPhone case cover or something like that.
Totally.
And so I think for something like that, though that TikTok was a big fail, and it just didn't work for a customer acquisition standpoint. And that's the most critical thing for us is like, you gotta acquire customers, and you gotta keep them, right?
Mhm.
And for us, like having them trust it and trust us and come in and trust the brand, so they stay with us. That's so important. We just weren't seeing that on TikTok. We're really only seeing that in Meta.
That's interesting. Let's double tap on that for a second, man. On the TikTok setting, what was the strategy? Like, were you working with like influencers on that? Was it like in-house creative? Like, talk to me just a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean everything. We've got a great team and in-house, and some very, very creative people. And so like I just challenge everyone and everything to just content, content, content. And so that's what we did. And then we also, we worked with some of the platforms that were giving us creative. I'm not gonna name names, and they were just awful.
Hmm.
And when I think when you're outsourcing that, again, my experience is with two brands here when we're doing this, which is a dog food and a supplement. Um, I think that the level of trust means if you try to outsource that to an agency, to a platform to try to get you that influencer or real creative,
Hmm.
it doesn't work. Like you
Yeah.
need you need to have some sort of, relationship with them so that there's that authenticity there, because the consumer sees through it so fast nowadays. They
Totally.
just see it through it so quickly. And so what we found is that either the in-house, where they know the brand, but that only gets you so far, the same faces. And so the out of house, where we're working with them directly, we provide them a storyboard. We make our storyboards in Notion. We share that with them. They've got their page. They can comment, ask questions. We provide guidance. But really, we want them to be authentic, and that's like the most important thing. So, um, you know, the learning for us was, can I outsource that stuff? We have to have that relationship with them because we need that trust.
Yeah, that's huge. And like you mentioned, I mean, this is something that they're putting in their body, like they need that authenticity, that credibility. I think like a lot of times, like what I've seen, consumer behavior seems to change every couple of years, and like the same ad funnels and creative kind of concepts like only get so far when they've been recycled by the, 10,000th brand to work with the same creative agency or stuff like that, that just kind of like
Yeah.
we can see through some of that. But I think, it's an interesting kind of conversation point, I think, around TikTok, because like there's just a lot of like praise for it, but I think it doesn't work for everybody and everyone's needs. I'm curious, like last question on that too, I'll ask is on the funnel side of things, were you guys approaching those like funnels, like the landing pages and stuff afterwards with TikTok from the same lens that you were with Meta? Were they like totally different experiences? How did you kind of set up those types of things?
No, I mean, yes. To answer your question, yes, very similar. We were trying to do that. But what we were also trying to do and play around with a lot, and I did this at Wild Earth too, was not, really trying to knit a funnel together that wasn't a purchase funnel coming off of TikTok,
Mm,
but an SMS sign up funnel.
got it.
And so grabbing, getting that quick hit, because the thought is like scroll, 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 and then the consumer's in this mindset, and then all of a sudden they bounce out and they bounce to a landing page that requires more attention. Not at that moment, not when they're in that mindset. So the thought was, okay, they're in scroll, scroll, scroll. Let's just capture their SMS, and that's all we want from them right now. And we'll get back to them with a drip that hopefully gets us greater conversion.
Totally.
Um, Wild Earth, it worked. It worked really well. Um, but I think that was like the early days, right? Because that was like when TikTok was like just coming out and like just started. I mean, that was pandemic, TikTok, the whole world was going crazy.
Yeah.
Um, and with Heights, it's a bit different. Um, Simply because Heights is a UK based company, and so most of our attention is in the UK, and SMS in UK is a totally different ballgame.
It
Like
is.
they
Yeah.
don't like it, they don't want it, they like all of that stuff. Over here in America, it's like here's my SMS, here's my mobile number, sell me something. Over
Hmm.
there, it's like how did you get my mobile number? Like and so. I think in the US that funnel really works. It worked for me in the past. I don't know how things have changed. I haven't really tested it here lately in the US though.
Totally. That's interesting. So I was at Attentive for a while, and
Oh, you
I
were?
was there. Yeah. So when we were expanding to the UK, we did all these consumer studies. We were like, the British are gonna love SMS, and like the stats were just not there to support it. I mean, they're still trying to fight the good fight and change that, but WhatsApp's embedded in that ecosystem of like communication already. But yeah, to your point, like it just doesn't seem like here in the US, like we're so used to, you go to every site, you're hit with that attentive, that postscript pop up, whatever, immediately
Yeah.
when you land. Like
Yeah.
the UK, it's a whole different ball game, I think, from a consumer standpoint.
Yeah. My guy Kennedy from Attentive over in the UK trying
Kennedy,
to
yeah.
do you know Kennedy?
Him and I work together. Big shout out to Kennedy. What a good guy.
Yeah, Kennedy's great. Kennedy's great. He's got a I don't I think he's still over there, man. He's got a hill to climb over there launching in London.
Yeah, they've got a good team. Big respect to the attentive team, but yeah, it's that's definitely an interesting kind of market to enter, I think, in the SMS space. But on the topic of like channels, I guess so you've mentioned paid and SMS now. Like your acquisition stack, was there anything else that was going into the mix? Were you going for like instant conversion from ads? Were you trying to build an email list and tandem to this? Like, talk to me
Yeah,
about some
for
of that
sure. I mean, the
stuff.
typical stack and funnel. If we weren't able to capture them, like we've got really good content, and we have a really good content team, and that has been important. And the reason it's important is because like what Dan and Joel are trying to build and what Heights is trying to build is a platform and not really a product.
Mhm.
Because taking Heights, the multivitamin, the probiotic, it's not a silver bullet. You still need to practice good brain care, whether it's through meditation, mindfulness, healthy eating, nutrition, all of those different things. And so we do have good content around that. And for folks that aren't converting right away, we do know we're getting healthy conversion through email and through not so much SMS, but also through our blog.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I think to your point, a lot of content needed there, I think. And also like, I worked with an oral care company and like we had a similar issue where like folks want to convert on day one. There's a lot that goes into making, a $200 purchase of a toothbrush and all the things that go with it. And like, even your best paid funnels still need email drips. They still need, the social content, all the
I think
things
email
that,
is a little, I think everyone comes in and I don't know if it's the email marketers pushing this number, but everyone's like, oh, your email should be 20%. Like I see that all the time and I'm like, I don't even know if that's true anymore. Especially, with SMS, but I don't, I think email is interesting. I think it depends upon the business. Like you said, a $200, item or a supplement you're putting into her body is very, very different from, a Case-to-Fi iPhone case, right?
totally. I think it's funny when you see those gurus showing like, hey, like your revenue should be 30% coming from email and 20% from SMS. And it's like, now they all work together. And like, I think this like cannibalization kind of mindset that it's like email's got to capture all that. And then that makes your retention team like fight against the revenue that they want to grab. It's like, we're all rowing in the same direction. I see like when agencies get involved, like that can really happen in a negative way. Sometimes I've seen for a lot of brands where like the agency just kind of like has to hit that revenue at all costs number, but it's,
I mean, it's like, my advice and my guidance to anyone doing, growth marketing, brand marketing, like whatever, is to really think about the consumer decision dynamic and like what are they going through in trying to decide, to purchase your product. So they're presented with the product and then what's their decision process? What's that dynamic look like? And it's hard, right, to take yourself out of your shoes and put yourself into the consumer's shoes. And so, you have to challenge yourself to do that, but then also you have to go out and talk to people, right? And I don't think enough, people go out and just simply talk to people and say, hey, why did you choose this product? And exit surveys are great, post-purchase is great, but that doesn't really give you the real, information that you need. And for the most part, a lot of people, I think that data is skewed. And I think for the most part, a lot of people, where did you first see this? Oh, I saw it here. Well, they probably first saw it over on YouTube or something like that. And they might have seen it over, who knows? It's probably the last place they saw it. And then, they're generally hustling through those post-purchase surveys. And so, they're good. There's nothing wrong with them, but it's like, go talk to people and understand like what led them to that decision. And that really helps, I think, inform what channels the revenue should be coming from.
That's fascinating to hear. And I agree. I think it's funny when you look at, everyone says like, feedback is the key, like talk to your customers. But like, I just think like when you live in the echo chamber of like, you're not going out and actually getting that insight, even from people who don't buy or just consumer kind of insight. Like, I just think there's a little bit deeper digging than like just talk to your customers that you need to do to actually understand like what those channels will be that will drive the end revenue. Because we do live in this insane world of dark social, of multi-touch attribution. Like there's so many things that happen that it's hard to say sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
Welcome to Caro, where the world's top brands and creators come together to sell each other's products through cross-store selling. You can join Caro as an online retailer, product supplier, or both. As a retailer or creator, you can sell other amazing products on your online store, allowing you to quickly expand your catalog and increase your average order value, all without the upfront costs of investment in new inventory. You simply sell more product and collect a profit. As a supplier, Caro opens up an entirely new sales channel, making your products available to be sold on thousands of other top brands and top creators' stores. Orders are sent right to their Shopify order queue, making fulfillment super easy. You're always in control as a supplier, choosing what products to make available to the network, what retailers you work with, and the margin that works best for your business. It's the biggest no-brainer in the history of e-commerce. There are literally thousands of brands and creators. Our team is ready to help you find a perfect pairing to your brand. What are you waiting for? Join Caro and start selling more together.
Well, speaking of attribution, let's talk about metrics a little bit. What, as an SVP of growth, what metrics do you look at daily, weekly, monthly? I'm just sort of curious, like how you keep you've got this huge responsibility of, pushing growth forward and keeping a hand on the wheel of all those channels. So how do you tackle a challenge like that?
I mean, first of all, you got to have good people, good team, right? And so, I'm a generalist. I know enough about everything to be dangerous, but like I rely on the people that are specialists to do those jobs, and they're really good. So like that's how you get it all done. You got to trust the people, give them the direction, give them the playing field, and then trust them to go make decisions within that playing field that you set the boundaries for. Like, hey, this is what we want to go do. Go make any decisions and do it at a fast pace, and have trust in them to do that. So that's the first thing. Metrics, you said daily, and that just makes me like, yeah. I really, really try not to, because like, there's so much variability in the daily that it's like, I don't want to look at that, but I do, of course. But I try not to use that. I try not to use those daily numbers to guide our thinking. Week over week, very much, yes. And what are we doing week over week? Because that's the growth pace that we want to have, right? And for me, like the big ones are the CAC to LTV ratio, and then really the LTV. And so, for me, those are the two number one things, and then everything else is just kind of like feeding up into those two things. But as long as I'm looking at those, and understanding, as long as I'm looking at those, they will help me understand the business that I need to from the long-term perspective.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's interesting on the daily comment, because like I even think about like, here on the B2B side doing marketing, like when you look at the daily, those spikes, you look at the graphs and it's so spiky and it's hard to, but when you look for the trend lines, you're looking for weekly, I think it's a much better lens to look at. I think daily across, anything can get like too reactive unless there's just like interesting insights to pull out from.
Absolutely.
But it can be a slippery slope.
I will say though, like I'll give you two things here. First, just on like, not even this is even less than daily. This is like hourly or minute. Like there is nothing more satisfying than like sending out an SMS and then just watching the click throughs and the traffic and the purchases. Totally. Just like go boom. That's fun. But the other one, so Wild Earth, we were on Shark Tank, and Mark Cuban invested. And so we cut that episode to to so many different ways, and we used that episode probably to like the chagrin of Disney and ABC. We'd use that in paid. But when they would replay the episode and when they put the episode out on TV, you could sit there, and we knew that the episode was coming, but you could sit there and the episode would play, and Ryan's sitting there pitching, and then Mark and him and the other sharks are going through the thing, and that. But you can watch the traffic on the site start to go up, and then Cuban says like, "I'm in," and then it goes up, and you start to get acquisitions.
And that's wild. Yeah, there's stuff like that where it's like it's really interesting to see that play by play, minute by minute. And I think that's like the beauty of, when you get in the right place. I mean, obviously everyone wants to be on Shark Tank. Everyone wants those opportunities, but like, when you get it, if you've got all the stuff optimized on the D2C side, like that can really be, the huge unlock too for growth and acquiring a ton of customers that are now you can be able to remarket to and keep that D2C flywheel kind of moving along.
Full on. Yeah. I mean, when people go on Shark Tank, they need to price in like the value of the earned media versus what they're giving away to the shark. The sharks know that.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I'm curious, before we kind of depart from heights, you talked a lot about some things that have worked really well, on the paid side, but I'm curious if you could just point out like one or two, of the most common, I guess, ad angles or kind of funnels that you're acquiring customers from, like what has been working really well, and kind of like you mentioned, there's a lot of education that goes into, convincing, someone to put something in their body and so on. So I'm curious, like what's been working really well, for you guys, if you could just point out like one or two examples.
Yeah, I mean the number one thing is social proof. So that angle of social proof, be it, someone that is, looks like the demo that we're going after, or it's someone that is, has some sort of celebrity status, if you will. And I'm not talking an
Okay.
influencer, I'm talking celebrity status. Um, so those are the two unlocks, while wildly different, in so many different ways in terms of cost, in terms of usability, in terms of all these different things. The social proof is really what's driven acquisition for us. More to the point, like the celebrity one. So Stephen Bartlett,
Mm.
while he's not known here in the US very much, he's very, very well known over in the UK. And we were able, Dan was on his podcast and we were able to use that. And people knew who Stephen Bartlett was. And so, we got that down to the tribe we call high performers. So people who want to do better in their lives, it'd be like listen to Tim Ferriss podcast over here, right? Those would be the high performers. And so that gave us like super, super, super good early signal. We had a tribe, we had a social proof celebrity, and that set a good growth frame for us. Most recently, we did a deal with Russell Brand on our probiotic. That was that was shaky and nerve wracking because, like, at the time I'm like getting ready to sign the deal, he was getting banned from YouTube, and
Mm.
it was all about his YouTube podcast. And I saw the YouTube numbers going down, 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 the viewership, and I was like, oh God, no, what do I do? What do we do? What do we do? But we knew social proof had worked. And
Totally.
so Russell Brand's got a good story in terms of his recovery and what he does now, but he also has a lot of crazy stuff he talks about. We went through
Yeah.
with it, and it performs good. It performs well. I would just say you have to be super, 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 super careful when you're getting into bed with a celebrity that you just can't control, because bad things can happen really quickly.
That's for sure. Yeah, that's interesting. Russell Brand, yeah, very polarizing guy. But I think in a lot of ways too. I mean, like what you said, you find the right partnerships with celebrities that can unlock an insane amount of growth. I'm gonna butcher this, but I think I listen to Andrew Huberman a lot, his podcast, and I think is it Momentous Supplements, or there's a supplements brand that Rob Dyrdek used to invest in, and I think Huberman has been just talking, praises about the supplements brand, and they've just boomed in growth. I think that guy's probably driven millions of dollars in business for the
For
supplements
sure.
brand just from promoting it, talking about it. It's like you find the right people. It gets you in front of the best lookalike audience that you will ever get your hands on, and I think that's like for me, like every brand of course wants this, but if you're able to find it and you're in the right category, the right folks endorsing it, like it's straight growth fuel in my opinion.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. You just got to make sure you know how to negotiate these contracts and like watch out, in terms of the usage, and make sure you're leveraging it as much as possible. Because it's not cheap, especially if you're an early
Yeah,
stage brand. Like, it can be a big investment. I'm sure Huberman, I never worked with him, but I'm sure, he's expensive because it's worth it.
totally. Yeah, I mean they command it. It's a good word of caution too, I think, to exercise some kind of insight into how you're going to think about that. Is there any advice that you might offer if someone's like, hey, I think podcasts or I think celebrity endorsement routes is the right approach, we're just starting our D2C business, we're trying to explode growth really really quickly, any advice? Like, would you recommend everyone tries to think about that if it makes sense, or do you think that it's not for every brand to explore?
I think it could be for every brand, just depends upon the stage. I think if you're just starting, Meta, there's nothing better than Meta. There really isn't. Meta with some search on Google.
Mhm.
Everything else is a distraction at that point. And until you
Totally.
have money to burn on awareness, I would stay away from podcasts. I would stay away from a lot of that stuff. Because the you have to have enough funding, especially for podcasts, to consistently be there. Because if you go in and one for podcasts, it's not going to work. You
Right.
have to be there over and over and over and over and over again, and that gets expensive.
Totally, it does. Yeah, you have to be willing to put in the money. It's not going to be a 1 month, just investment and that's it. I think for a lot of folks, I mean, there are absurd cases where someone just puts someone on Instagram, they put them in their pod, and overnight there's millions of sales. Like that doesn't happen, for every brand. Of
No,
course, it's a results may vary kind of concept. I think.
exactly. Buyer beware.
Totally, totally. Well, this wouldn't be a D2C podcast right now if I didn't talk about AI just for a quick second.
Yeah,
I think I read on your LinkedIn that you recently incorporated ChatGPT into the marketing and growth process. Can you talk just a little bit about how you're using AI today and how it's helping or improving kind of what
I
you're doing
love it.
daily?
Yeah, I love it. We come up with ideas, and I say we, I mean the team comes up with ideas, and then it's just like take that idea, take what you have, and like how can we just exponentially expand on that? And that's what AI does. So like, it's you there's so many resources for prompts nowadays. Everyone's trying to get you to, like what is it people do on LinkedIn now? It's like, you know, wave at me in the comments and I'll send you this
Oh
like
yeah,
prompt guide or whatever. But you can get this
sure.
on LinkedIn, no problem. But really, it's you take your concept and then you feed it into AI and say, give me 10 more examples of something like this that's more edgy, that's softer, that's more romantic, that's whatever the variable is that you want. And it could be a tagline, it could be a copy line, it could be whatever, and just expansiveness of our original idea that AI pushes is what I love about it because we can't think of everything, and it's just a great way to try I guess think of everything. I haven't used it. We've only used it for like copy. I haven't used it for visual at all. I think that would be super interesting. I think there's a lot behind that, but we're just not there yet. It's
Totally.
gonna
It's
get
an
there soon
interesting.
enough.
Yeah, I'd love to hear, how things progress with that if you do step into that creative kind of side of it. I was hosting an AI panel last week. Talking to Ezra Firestone just about some of how he's using AI with Boom, with some of his other business ventures, and like he was talking a lot about it's not a an end all be all that you should fully rely on AI. Like it's it should be a tool to help generate new ideas, but like the last mile always I think still is the human touch, at least for now. Maybe GPT 5, 6 will replace some of those
I
things. Who knows? But
I
it's
would agree
interesting.
with that. Like, I think it's the start and the finish is the human, and in the middle, right? Like, it can help you just accelerate a lot faster, but you still have to put in that original concept, that original prompt, that original whatever it may be,
Totally.
for AI to expand. And then, some of the stuff you get out of there are very wild. You still got to filter. You can't just take everything and dump it into Meta and be like, okay, go for this. I think one of the things I loved doing was just playing with the voice. And I would do this, I still do it. It'd be like, put the prompt in, get the content back, and then just for whatever giggles, okay, now do it in the voice of Matthew McConaughey, and now do it in the voice of Barack Obama, and like
Sure.
the juxtaposition between the two, it's like so scary. It's the same content, but it's just their speaking habits of Matthew McConaughey versus Barack Obama as reflected by AI. It's pretty
Totally.
wild. Yeah.
Man, it's fascinating. I mean, to just sit down and play with it, even for a little while, you also just open up other parts of your creativity, I think, within it too. And like, I think that for me is one of the most beautiful things about what it's done for me and my work is like, I think I'm just going to with, either problems, creative outlets, and I'm coming back with more inspiration than anything. The things that you just wouldn't maybe think of, or sometimes there's the other side of it where like, I think there's something to be said about going with your gut sometimes still and not relying fully on the AI. Like I think it's there's
Yeah.
a fine line, I think for sure.
You have to. You have to. And then as long as people recognize that, they'll be okay.
Totally. It's interesting, man. Well, we covered a lot of ground here so far. I think the last thing I wanted to ask you for more folks who are just, thinking about making that growth hire themselves, I think like a lot of times, I have the more merchants I've talked with, they're like, yeah, we want to bring on someone in growth this year. Like, we need to unlock it. We need someone to come in and really give us, that kind of, that the boost that we need right now. But I think there's a lot of variables that go into making the right hire. So I guess I'm curious, like, when you have to think about, like, what qualities do you think make for a good growth marketer, or just someone in growth in general, that you might say people should kind of look for and kind of and prioritize, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I would prioritize. I think there's a couple things. Number one is speed. The people in growth need to move. You need to move quickly, and there's all the tools in the world to do that. But if you're not moving quickly, then you're actually not really utilizing the tools the way they should be. So anyone who's running growth should have a mindset of speed. The second thing is they also need to have a mindset of, like, it's okay to fail. Nothing is precious. Growth, especially in D2C, comes in tranches, and you're going to go through plateau, and then I don't want to plateau now. So the ability to just continue moving through that with the process is so important. So speed and process. And I think those are the two things that I look for.
Speed and process. I think those are spot on. And I think I had some other folks on pod recently who, in growth roles as well, and similar themes as well. But I think something that you said at the beginning, which I think I'll take away with me too, is being able to kind of test, iterate fast, but also kill fast too if things aren't working. Like, being able to have that kind of gut, kind of like instinct to just continue on. A lot can be said, I think, from that. Hans, this has been awesome, man. I appreciate you, just talking to so much. And I know that you're stepping into a new growth advisory role. What does this next chapter of your career kind of look like for you, and what are you excited about for the future?
I mean, yes, more of a growth advisory role for Heights. But for me, the next chapter is finding, going back to better for people, better for planet. That's what I thrive on. And so, Heights is a great company. We did what we needed to do, and now their trajectory is kind of set for them. And for me, just finding that next product of better for people, better for planet, that's what I'm going to be doing.
Love it, man. Well, I'm wishing you all the best. I think just a lot of really cool stuff in your story. I think that resonates with me. I'm sure it resonates a lot with others, and finding work that you're passionate about and keeping that at the core of what you do. I know it's not, the path that everyone takes, but I think it's a really noble path nonetheless.
It's fun. Thanks, Blake.
Thanks so much for watching today's episode. I hope you got 2% better for watching, and if you haven't already, consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel so you never miss another episode. We have a variety of e-com topics to talk about this season that's going to get you 2% better each week across a variety of topics. Also, if you want exclusive content not covered in these episodes that's super tactical, head over to getcaro.com/podcast. You'll find full episode recaps, transcripts, and so much more content that we don't have time to cover in these episodes. Lastly, if you want to continue on the journey right now, I encourage you to do so. I will link to another episode right here. You can take advantage of that. Click just right there, and that'll take you to that episode. And with that, I'll see you next week on 2% the podcast.